let's begin with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your blessings. Thank you for this day that you have made. Thank you for this evening or morning, part of the world we're in. And Lord, we ask for your blessing upon this time as we look at more information in relation to health and so on. We just ask for the blessing of your Spirit, for your presence to be with us, for us to seek to know and understand the truth, and that the truth might clarify many things in our minds. And this we pray, thanking you for answering in Jesus' name. Amen. So today we are going to be looking at the topic of false concepts and health and healing. And so false concepts in health and healing, there are all sorts of options that are out there as far as healing modalities are concerned. And the question that we can ask is, are they all equally valid? And if so, well, hey, if not, well, then how does one discern amongst them? And so we're going to be looking at that today. We recognize that laws govern function. So if there's anything that functions, then there's a law that governs its function. And that to remain within the law is going to lead to function. As long as we're remaining within the law, there's going to be a function that's the result of that. But when we go outside of or contrary to law, that's when we experience dysfunction, right? And a violation of law, violating law, whether moral or natural, is sin. It's God's law one way or the other. And only something that is spiritual can sin, right? It's only something that's spiritual that can sin. Symptoms, disease, and death are the dysfunction that result from sin, right? And we are told that men and women bring disease upon themselves by transgressing the laws of God. The laws of nature, as truly as the precepts of the Decalogue, are divine, and only in obedience to them can health be recovered or preserved. Every practice which destroys the physical, mental, or moral energies is sin, right? Whether it's related directly to the moral law or whether it is to the secondary laws associated with the moral law, the physical laws or the natural laws, then that which destroys physical, mental, or moral energies is sin. Now, disease, well, that is an effort of nature to free the system, right? Now, how does that work? Well, you get increased mucus production. You have fever, you have sweating, you have runny nose, you've got a cough, you have nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, inflammation, fatigue, tiredness, and so on. All of these are various different symptoms of disease. And all of these are an effort of nature to free the system. So you have increased mucus production. Well, that helps to expel impurities. You have sweating, that helps to expel impurities. You have runny nose, that's helping to expel it. You have cough, that's helping to expel it. Vomiting, diarrhea, and so on, those help to expel impurities. The symptoms that you have help to stop the abuse of overconsumption. So you're not likely to overeat while you're nauseous, or you're vomiting, or you have digestive issues or other things like that, or you're just plain fatigued and tired out, and it's not a high priority for you. And it helps to promote rest. Again, when you're fatigued, when you're tired, when all this stuff is going on, you tend to get caught up on the rest that you were missing out on, and so on, right? So all of these are efforts of nature to free the system from violations of law. And of course, we're told that in Ministry of Healing, disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health, right? So that's where it comes from, right? And health, well, health is the result of perfect righteousness, perfect harmony with the law. That's the foundation of health, because once one sin entered, well, there was no more perfect righteousness, and disease and death were the result of that. And we saw that back with Adam and Eve and the results of what happened there. Now, when sin comes, it's not just a sin. What happened is mankind was deceived into a state, and that state is we call sinful nature. And it's a state of self-deception. And the foundation of that state of self-deception is this idea, this belief that I am God. And from that come many multitudes of problems, and we've talked about it many times. I'm not going to go into it in detail right now. But that sinful nature deceives us into seeing violations of law as gain, right? So that sinful nature deceives us to look at things and to perceive that if I violate the law this time, it's actually a gain. For example, we might see that it is a gain to stay up late because we're working on a particular project and we want to get it done. We might see that it's a gain to overeat at this particular meal. Why? Because it has some really yummy food and we really like it and we want to eat more of it, and so on and so on, right? So, so we see in our sinful nature that, again, the violation of law is a gain. And once we are self-deceived, then we have no capacity to fix our self-deception. And if that self-deception causes us to see the violation of law as a gain, then we will continue to violate law in the context of that self-deception. Now, you might think, well, hang on, if we had no capacity to fix our self-deception, would we ever be able to get out of it? Well, that's why we need a savior. That's exactly why we need a savior. So when it comes to disease and when it comes to these problems, the solution must address the foundation, which is the sinful nature that deceives us to sin and to commit sin that comes from it and the violation of law, right? So the solution has to address that foundation. So the solution must include the gospel. It must, right? If it doesn't include the gospel, then it's not the solution. And the solution will amend the violations of law and bring you back into harmony with the law. That's what it's going to do. It's going to not only, not only address or deal with the sinful nature, but then the violations that come in association with the sinful nature. And so, in essence, we could say that it's going to result in a change of your lifestyle, right? The solution is also going to address the physiologic disturbances that come as a result of those violations of law, and looking at restoring proper physiology, right? So physiology gets disturbed as a result of this, and it veers one direction or another direction. And the solution is going to look at taking that disturbed physiology and return it back to proper function, proper physiology. Now, if you have too much of something that you need, for example, you've been eating too much food, well, the solution is going to involve reducing that intake or stopping the intake for a while, like fasting, and increase the elimination of that. So, for example, exercising, right? Increasing the elimination of the excess energy, the excess calories that an individual has built up. If you have had too little of something that you need, and you find yourself with a vitamin deficiency or a mineral deficiency or something of that nature, then the solution is going to involve increasing the intake of whatever it is that you have too little of and reducing its elimination, right? And excuse me, if you are consuming or bringing in something that's wrong, that you don't need, let's say a poison, right? Well, then the solution is going to involve stopping the intake of whatever that poison or whatever that wrong thing is, and then somehow assisting and increase in its elimination, right? And these are all things that the solution is going to be involved in. So we are told also in Ministry of Healing, page 127, right after it says disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. Then it goes on to say, in the case of sickness, first, the cause should be ascertained. If you don't know what the cause is, then you can't fix it. And you're really not going to fix the condition if you don't get to the cause. So you got to get to the cause first. And that is going to be ultimately the foundational cause is sin and the deception of sinful nature, or sin manifested through other avenues that we've talked about before. Second, your unhealthful conditions should be changed, right? So it's appropriate to work on the conditions that are there, that are unhealthful. Whether that is the unhealthful environment that you're living in or other things of that nature. You have wrong habits, those need to be corrected as well. That's appropriate. That's part of the restoration process. And then nature assisted in her effort to expel impurities and reestablish right conditions in the system. So, you know, lots of water and sweating and other things of that nature in order to expel those impurities and doing what is needed to reestablish right conditions. Again, decreasing excesses, increasing deficiencies, or the things that you're deficient in, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to, you know, solutions to disease and disease states, there are some basic principles, and that is that you only want to use that which assists or restores proper physiology, right? If it destroys proper physiology, that's not something that you want to use, right? You want to use nothing that is poisonous and nothing that leaves a negative effect on the system, right? Those are also principles that we need to consider. You also want to use nothing that taxes or debilitates the system. Well, these two statements could be similar, right? Poisons will definitely tax and debilitate the system. And if there's anything that taxes or debilitates the system, then it's going to leave a negative effect on the system as well. So we might say that the two statements are the same, but we'll leave them anyways. And then you want to use nothing that is addictive or habit forming in your process of treatment. There are many things that we use that set up lifelong patterns of abuse. I know many patients that have been that I have dealt with and tried to help to get them over their addictions, and their addictions began with the use of prescribed medications that were addictive, habit forming, right? And you want to always proceed with the understanding that healing comes from God alone, not the modality that you use. That's important. God is a healer, not the things that you use. What you use is only a way of cooperating with God in his process of healing you, right? There are many ways of practicing the healing art, but guess what? There is only one way that heaven approves. Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't it sound like what God says in regard to salvation, right? There is only one name under heaven by which men can be saved, right? There is only one way to the Father, And that's through the sun and so on. And when it comes to health and healing, it's the same. There is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. All right, so it doesn't tax or debilitate. We looked at that already. And then we read pure air, water, cleanliness, proper diet, purity of life, and firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. All right, so what are those remedies? Pure air, pure water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God. All right, oh, those are remedies. Go figure. Yet these remedies are going out of date because they're skillful use, right? It takes skill to know how to use water in hydrotherapy treatments. And it takes skill to understand how to make food and make it tasty and make it healthy, right? It takes skill, I guess, to know how to be pure in your life, especially in interactions with others and so on. Purity goes far beyond just skin purity, but also purity of mind, purity of thought, purity of words, purity of actions, and so on. Right? So yeah, these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all with but little expense. But drugs are expensive, both in the outlay of means, how much they cost to get, and in the effect produced upon the system. Okay. Back to Ministry of Healing, page 127. Pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. Well, we can understand pure air. We understand sunlight. Abstemiousness, that means to abstain from that which is harmful. Another term is temperance, which also means to use wisely that which is good. Rest, we got it. Exercise, yep. Proper diet, yep. Use of water, okay. Not that's all the water that you drink, but it's also the water that you bathe in, and then it's also hydrotherapy, treatments using water. Trust in divine power, these are the true remedies, right? Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. It is essential both to understand the principles involved in the treatment of the sick and to have a practical training that will enable one rightly to use this knowledge, right? So, all right, that's appropriate. These are all appropriate. So if we look at things that are approved healing modalities, well, of course, lifestyle change, according to the principles that we find in the Word of God, herbs and natural substances that God has given us to use, right? We see that as well. Hydrotherapy, the use of water and water treatments and helping to restore proper function to the body. Massage is also another appropriate way of also impacting muscle, impacting circulatory system, the musculoskeletal system, and so on, and helping from that standpoint. Surgery is legitimate as well. That was during the first 7 days of creation, because everything needed for health was was available to us in the first 7 days of creation. And of course, God produced, had surgery on Adam and took from him a rib and so on. So surgery is a legitimate avenue as well. It's not one that we necessarily want to run to at the beginning, but it's a legitimate form, and God does work with the surgeons and guide the hands of those surgeons that are submitted to Him, and helps in those delicate operations. And it helps to remember to do the best you can with what you've got, right? Do the best you can with what you have. That's appropriate, right? So we might not always be in an ideal situation. We might not always be in a situation where we can effectively or appropriately use a number of these different things, depending on the circumstance or situation. There might be traumas, emergencies, accidents, other things of that nature. So do the best you can
Do you think that
with
you could take
with
some of
what
this
you
stuff
have.
back with you if
Okay.
you have room?
You help me switch the chairs out or the seats in my.
Emmeline, we will mute you as you switch the seats out. Okay. And so, yes, do the best you can with what you've got. Now, we recognize that truth does not contradict itself. And yes, there can be many pieces like a puzzle to the truth. And if true, all of the pieces are going to complement each other. They will fit together, right? But they might not necessarily, not every piece is necessarily going to fit directly with every other piece, but eventually they will. But if there's a contradiction, then that means that there's something that's false. There's something that's an error there, because truth doesn't contradict itself. And it's true that there is only one truth, but there are, well, many errors, right? Many errors. Now, if this sequence of numbers and letters and colors and so on, if that represented the truth, then an error is simply changing the order of the truth. So we could change the chronological order so that 2 became before 1 rather than 1 before 2. We could change the size or the importance of things. Instead of 7 being bigger than 6, now we have 6 bigger than 7. And we can re-emphasize things in a different way, and that can change the meaning of it, and so on. We can change the orientation. So instead of 5 being above 10, now 10 is above 5. We can omit something. Instead of there being 2, 3, and 4, then it's 2, 4, and 5. And we can then add something that doesn't belong. Instead of it being 8, 9, 10, then you have 8, a 9, and so on, right? So there is one truth, but there are many ways of producing errors. Similarly, when it comes to health and healing, there is one way that heaven approves, and there are many counterfeits, right? There are many counterfeits that are out there. We're told that the path to error often appears to lie close to the path of truth, right? Right. So order is really important. It is. We understand, and we've seen that when we talked about the presentation on health by faith, that health and healing is by the grace of God strictly. And that grace of God is accepted by faith. And when faith grabs hold of that grace, then it begins to work in us to will and to do of God's will, right? Works in harmony with his will. But it does not work backwards. It is not by works that we prove our faith, by which we can then obtain or deserve the grace of God. It doesn't work that way. Right? It is by grace through faith, which then works. It is not by works that we then prove our faith, by which we then obtain grace, right? And it's not by some components missing, right? So we address the physical factors, but we leave the gospel out. Well, that's not an appropriate, that's going to be an error. That's not going to be the truth. And so we can have the best hospital systems. We can have the best physical treatment modalities. We can have the latest, radiation treatments and proton accelerators and all sorts of modalities that we can have in our hospital systems. But if the gospel is excluded, if it's left out, if it is a non-important component of our treatment modalities, then it's going to be the error, not the truth, right? And adding things that don't belong there, cosmic energy, the practitioner's own healing capacities, and so on and so forth, that's going to be error as well. So we're going to look at some radical criteria when it comes to evaluating different treatment modalities and whether they fit or whether they don't. Radical is an acronym. R stands for rely. If it is the true form of healing, then it will lead people to trust in and rely upon the Creator God as the source of healing, right? So it will leave us dependent upon God. We will rely upon Him rather than any modality, any physical thing, and so on and so forth. A stands for anatomy, the first A. So it will cooperate with and support proper anatomy and physiology, right? An understanding of anatomy and physiology is important. D means debilitate or debilitating. It will not introduce the correct form of healing will not introduce anything debilitating or harmful into the system, whether that is short-term or long-term. It will seek to avoid those things that are poisonous or harmful to the system, because the system does not benefit by being poisoned or harmed, even in the process of healing. I means independence. So it will restore the individual to noble independence of self-control and temperance, right? So the individual will be restored to a state where they can control themselves, they can practice temperance in Christ. And it will bring them back to that, right? If it's a form of healing where the individual can continue to be out of self-control, to continue to be intemperate and so on and so forth, and yet heal, then it's not a correct modality, right? C stands for creation. So the correct model of healing is going to be consistent with the character of the Creator and the purpose and the modalities of creation. Again, everything that you need for health is going to be found in the first 7 days of Earth's history, right? Is it simple, right? Things of creation are simple as far as its use is concerned. It might be, like a flower might be very complicated in its intricate function, but a flower itself is simple, and how you use a flower is going to be simple, as opposed to being complicated in its use and so on, requiring lots of equipment, specialized things, and so on and so forth. Things of creation are natural as opposed to synthetic and man-made. Things of creation are available. You find them when you go to this continent and that continent and this country and so on and so forth, as opposed to being something that's limited in a warehouse somewhere and is on the idea of scarcity. And if it's widely available, then it's going to be inexpensive, right? But if it's limited and it's locked in a warehouse, in somebody's warehouse, well, then they can charge a lot of money for it and it can be expensive and so on. So our creation characteristics are going to be simple, natural, available, and inexpensive, right? Then the second A means that it addresses the cause. It's going to get to the root cause of the issue. And then L, it's going to restore us to law, right? Through faith, by grace, through faith, it will bring one back to conformity to the fundamental law of nature, the law of life, taking to give, which is the law of God, and its secondary laws as well, right? So this is going to be our radical criteria for any treatment modality. So we're going to look at various different treatment modalities. We're not going to look at them all. I know that there's a whole long list that people want to go through and go, well, what about this one, that one? Well, you look at the principles related to the true modality that God has for us and the things that He has blessed, and then you compare any other treatment modality to that and go, okay, does it fit, does it not fit, right? And use the radical criteria with it as well. Now, there's a few questions that we can ask when it relates to treatment modalities. Where did the method come from? What's its source, right? Does it have any mystical roots? And what was it that the founder believed and the founder believed about this modality? And what's their life story? And, what were they involved in and so on? Does the method follow laws of physiology or does it not, right? What's the ultimate direction that the therapy is headed in? What direction does it take you, right? Am I led towards Jesus, or am I led towards something else or someone else? Do I still need him as a savior, or have I or my therapist become my savior? Right? These are important questions, or my doctor, whoever it is, right? Is my trust in someone, including myself, or something else, or is it in God? And does it teach and direct the individual to seek and know and follow God's laws of health, or does it promise to bring you health and healing regardless of the violations or the continued violations of the laws of health? Right. These are all important questions. And who is it that receives credit for the healing? Right. For example, I'll give you this. When I first started getting into all of this, I was in Trinidad. I was in the country of Trinidad. And I was working there, and that was when I began to be interested. I began to be more disillusioned with my medical practice. I began interested more in lifestyle and started to learn about natural remedies. In Trinidad, they got all sorts of natural remedies, all sorts of stuff. I mean, just all sorts of stuff. And it was difficult for me, even as a physician, to kind of try to weed through all of these different things. And somebody was, you know, they were looking at the particular product was an alkaline water, a particular brand of alkaline water. And they get, somebody was into that, and they were selling these machines that cost thousands of dollars to make this alkaline water and so on, and all the health benefits with it. And they gave me a DVD showing me all of these different experiments and, everything that they were saying and all this kind of stuff. And so I watched it and I was like, well, I don't know, maybe there's something legitimate to this and so on. And then I got to the testimonies at the end, and this testimony said, oh, I didn't have to change the way that I ate. All I had to do was drink this water and I got better. And somebody else said, oh, I didn't have to exercise, and all I had to do was drink this water and I got better. Somebody else said, oh, I didn't have to do, this other law of health. All I had to do was drink this water and I got better. And that was my red flag. I was like, all right. So I can use this modality and I can avoid the other laws of health and I can be okay. False method. False method. Right. So we're going to begin back a long ways, and we're going back to Babylon. And Babylon was not just the originator of different systems of worship, but it was also a perpetuator, an originator and perpetuator of different forms of healing, right? And it involved astrology. It involved a concept called dualism, and then also paganism. All of these came out through Babylon. And some of the basic concepts or the basic ideas that stem from here is the idea of universal energy and dualism, right? So universal energy here in this concept is divided into two opposing forces. So you have good and evil, you've got male and female, you've got positive and negative, you have dark and light, you have sun and moon, and so on. You have yang, which is positive, and you have yin, which is negative, and so on. And so the proper function of everything is dependent then upon a balance of these two opposing forces. It's not to say that there is, that you need to have, it would be, in this system, it would be bad to have all good and no evil, because there needs to be a balance of both, right? That's dualism. Dualism is not the idea that there are two different things like good and evil, male and female, positive, negative, light and dark, sun and moon, and so on. It's the idea that there needs to be both. Like, you can't just have good, you need to have evil as well. And the good is not well off if it's only good. And the evil is not well off if it's only evil. You're only well off when there's a balance of both, right? That's the idea of dualism. And there is this pagan view of the cosmos and origins of things. And the idea that there needs to be the proper balance of all of these different things. And that the proper balance of these was the initiation of the creation of the cosmos. The proper balance was there in the creation of the earth and then of man as well. And all of these only function as you maintain a proper balance of all of these different components, right? So disease and illnesses were believed to be the result of the imbalance of these energies. And this energy was considered essentially God, right? I.e., it's pantheism. All is one and one is all. So you had the belief that disease is a spiritual universal energy imbalance that manifests in physical disease. All right, so this is pantheism that comes into this as well. And the treatment methods in this pagan concept are, again, not dependent upon natural laws that we can discern. And what they try to do is to correct the balance or the flow of this special energy that's permeating the universe from which all substances originate, and balance this energy through the body of the individual so that when the energy flow through the individual is balanced, then the individual can retain or regain health and healing. This is the idea behind it, right? And so there are some prominent systems and methods that come in this concept, right? One of those is by using certain treatment modalities, you can activate the energy that's inherent in oneself to bring about a restoration of health, but also the elevation of some of your consciousness to the level of Godhead. This is some of the concepts that come out of this. And so we have some major systems of energy therapies. One of those is Ayurveda. Right. And you might be familiar with Ayurveda, comes out of the Indian continent, very popular method of treatment. And Ayurveda focuses on the balancing of chakras. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And it does so using various different things, including yoga, meditation, the use of crystals, herbs, and essential oils and aromatherapy. These are some of the major modalities of chakra balancing in Ayurveda. We also have Chinese traditional medicine, and under Chinese traditional medicine, you have meridian therapies or balancing of qi, right? This energy force in an individual. And there's various different modalities as well. The use of acupuncture or acupressure, moxibustion, qigong, meditation. There's the use of various different herbs, animal substances, elements, and extracts as well. And we'll talk about all of this just here. So let's focus in on Ayurveda. Ayurveda is science of life. So Ayur means life and Veda means science or knowledge. So it's the idea of the science of life. And again, it's a system of medicine that developed in the Indian subcontinent. And it's strongly associated with the Hindu religion. And the idea, the concept behind it is that the Hindu god Dhanvantari incarnated himself as a king and came to the earth and taught medicine to a group of physicians. And that became the basis of Ayurveda. So this is something that comes from the Hindu gods to humanity, to bless humanity. In Ayurveda, of course, balance is an essential philosophy, as it is with many other dualistic concepts or dualistic ideas. And in this particular system, balance is obtained by meditation. It's obtained with yoga, with herbs, diet, massage, exercise, crystals, incense, and other modalities. Now, it's not that all of these modalities are bad. Of course, we've said massage is good, herbs are good. Diet, depending on the type of diet, is going to be good as well. But the way that it's used is not necessarily right. So in this particular concept of health and healing, the chakras are essential to Ayurvedic philosophy, right? So what is a chakra? Well, a chakra is a wheel or a disc, and it's considered to be wheels of spinning energy aligned with the spine and ascending from the lower spinal column, from your coccyx all the way up to the top of your head, 7 different chakras, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and ascending from the lower spinal column to the top of the head where matter and consciousness meet. And this invisible energy is called prana, or vital life force, and it's believed to keep one vibrant, healthy, and alive, right? So these are chakras, wheels or discs of energy, and they are supposed to correspond to massive nerve centers in the body, which contain bundles of nerves and major organs, as well as one's psychological, emotional, and spiritual states of being. And it's believed to be essential that the 7 main chakras staying open and aligned and fluid. And if there's a blockage, then energy of that energy flow, then physical disease is the result. Right? So this is the idea behind it. Right? Now, the purpose of life is to emerge through the confines of the physical body, the ego, the mind, and intellect, and push beyond the individual soul that ties you to the endless cycle of birth and rebirth to be freed from the shackles of desire and become one with the universal consciousness. Now, these are all statements that I've obtained from different authors or different sites in relation to their understanding of these things, right? That are practitioners of these things and how they understand them and their use. So this can only be obtained by opening and balancing the chakras from the lowest to the highest, right? So how do you balance those chakras? Well, you have the root chakra, the sacral chakra, the solar plexus chakra, the heart chakra, throat chakra, the third eye chakra, and the crown chakra, or the lotus. So one of the ways that you balance the chakras is meditation. So this is tapping into your higher self, your inner knower, for guidance to connect you to the universal consciousness. That's one of the ideas of meditation. It's done through breathing exercises as well. Yoga is a way as well. Different poses are supposed to open the different chakras. And so it's for chakra balancing. Also, different poses are used in honor to different Hindu gods. Of course, you know that there are many, many Hindu gods in the Hindu religion. So each of the different poses are obeisance to the particular Hindu gods of that particular pose, right? You can balance the chakras through different mantras or vibrations. So this might take the form of like self-hypnosis, where individuals, keep repeating the same Om or Ram, Ram, Ram over and over again, and so on, kind of a self-hypnosis type of issue. Certain colors, you can see the root chakra is red, the sacral chakra is orange, the sacral plexus, solar plexus is yellow, heart chakra is green, and so on. And so if you have different colors in your environment, and that helps to influence the different chakras. Certain gems are associated with the different chakras as well. So to have those close and to touch them and so on. And then different herbs and aromatherapy, different smells can be used for these chakras. And so again, the use of these different things is to control the universal energy that's flowing through the individual through these various different chakras. So does it rely upon the creator? Does it support proper anatomy and physiology? Does it introduce anything debilitating? Does it restore independence and self-control to the individual? Is it consistent with the creator and creation? Does it address the cause? And does it conform to the fundamental law, the law of life? Well, the answer is no. So then we would mark this off the list as the one way that heaven approves, right? Well, what about yoga? Let's take that one, because that's probably most prominent of Ayurveda that has come into the Western world. Yoga comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, means to join or have union or to yoke together. So yoga is the yoking together of the universal conscious self with the individual self, right? So it's the as one practitioner puts it, it's the steady, unwavering path to the divine using disciplined meditation, right? So it's in conjunction with meditation, right? It's fundamental to Hindu belief and Hindu culture. It's very intertwined. And the goal, we're told, of the yogi was to ascend into the immortal realms of pure spirit, to imbibe the intuitional nectar of enlightenment, to eradicate disease and find liberation from suffering. These are all objectives of those that are deep into this. And the goals of yoga are varied. They can range from improving health. I think that's why most people are involved in the Western culture, to achieving moksha, which is relief from death. But still, one is participating in these various different obeisances to different gods. You notice when anybody, if anybody is involved in these practices, you notice that they have certain poses, and this is very common to have this particular pose with the feet bent and so on and so forth. If you see somebody in that particular pose, do you think that they are in prayer to God, or you think something else is happening? Well, you think something else is happening because that's not a God prayer pose, right? So does this rely upon the creator? No. Support proper anatomy and physiology? I don't know. Introduce anything debilitating? Physically? No. Spiritually? Restore independence and self-control? Maybe. Consistent with the creator and creation? Not exactly. Does it address the cause? No. Does it conform to the fundamental law? No. All right. So we would throw this one out as the one way that heaven approves. What about Chinese traditional medicine? Well, it's based on Taoism, which means the way. And there's three basic beliefs of Taoism. One is that man is the image of the cosmos. So what you see in the cosmos, its construction, its relation to other bodies in the cosmos, plus the energy that's flowing through it, man is kind of a microcosm of the whole cosmos. That universal energy, or qi, is composed of two parts, of yin and yang. So again, we have dualism. And that there are 5 basic elements involved in transformation and creation: metal, wood, earth, fire, and water, right? All of these are beliefs along with Chinese traditional medicine. So in the Chinese medicine definition of disease, disease is the result of disharmony in the balance of yin and yang, right? So again, we've got the dualism balance thing going on. So imbalance can occur for many reasons, which can include lifestyle. And it's believed that some physical disorders are caused by winds, which relate to those 5 fundamental elements involved in creation, wood, fire, metal, and so on, water. And foods are considered yin or yang. So you have certain foods that are yin foods, and you have other foods that are yang foods. And so how are you going to balance your diet? You're not going to balance your diet in relation to nutritional components of your diet. You're going to balance your diet in regards to yin and yang, and the balance of energy, yin and yang energy, that you're going to have flowing through your body because of what you eat. Right. And that's how you're going to maintain health. And imbalance, of course, is going to bring illness. So it's complex what causes imbalance and what things are yin and what things are yang. Moon is yin, sun is yang. Female is yin, male is yang. Yin, inside is yin, outside is yang. Cold is yin, hot is yang. Downward is yin, upward is yang. Damp or moist is yin, and dry is yang. Lower part of the body is yin, upper part of the body is yang. Cold symptoms like cold intolerance, cold limbs, feeling cold is yin. Heat symptoms like fever, night sweats, and other things like that are yang. All right, so you kind of get the idea. So in Chinese traditional medicine, it's not just a flow of universal energy through the body, but there are pathways. There are channels called meridians that flow through the body. So that vital energy circulates through those channels, and those channels have branches, and each channel is connected to bodily organs and certain body functions. So in traditional Chinese medicine, you focus on body functions such as digestion, breathing, temperature maintenance, and so on. You're not so concerned with its anatomy, except as you're starting to interact with the meridians, right? So in their tradition, health is dependent upon that flow of qi through the meridians to the various different organs, also the circulation of the blood, and the balance between the function of the zhang organs, which include the heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidney, and the fu organs, which is the small intestine, large intestine, gallbladder, urinary bladder, stomach, and the sanjiao, which is an organ that nobody's been able to find yet. But anyways, the balance between the zhang organs and the fu organs. And disease is an imbalance in these different systems. So when it comes to interventions or treatments, you use herbs, which usually have somewhere between 9 to 18 different herbs that are put together. They use elements and extracts, and there's over 100,000 recipes for what's needed to help to rebalance your yin and yang. You use substances, animal substances like cow gallstones, bear bile, these different things. There's acupuncture and acupressure, which help to balance the qi, life force going through the individual. There's moxibustion, which is, you might have seen pictures of it. It's an individual that has like a glass kind of cupping type of thing on the skin. They burn some mugwort on the inside of it. It creates a suction, and then the skin gets pulled up while it's burning into the glass, and then it stays there for a while, and then they pull it off, and an individual has a big hickey where where that happened. Again, that's that's supposed to balance qi force through the body. There's Qigong exercises. You've probably seen that when, like out in parks in China or other Eastern countries, and individuals are out there and they're doing very slow poses and they're moving and so on and so forth. Well, their exercise, that's Qigong, and it's a mixture of exercise, meditation, breathing, focused awareness, and so on. And all of that is to balance your qi as well. So does this rely upon the creator? Nope. Support proper anatomy and physiology? Nope. Introduce anything debilitating? Well, cow gallstones, bear bile, other things like that? Yeah, probably. Restore independence and self-control? Consistent with the creator and creation? Address the cause? Conform to the fundamental law? So we knocked that one off the list as, the one way that heaven approves. Now, focusing a little more closely on acupuncture, because again, that's more prominent in our Western culture. It's the ancient Chinese practice of sticking needles into the body to influence the flow of qi. And the number of acupuncture points has grown from about 365 to over 2,000 points. So it's gotten a little bit more sophisticated, but the idea is the same. And it's based upon the belief, again, that health is determined by a balance of the flow of qi. And according to the theory, qi circulates in the body along the 12 major energy pathways, the meridians, linked to specific organs and organ systems. There's over 1,000 up to 2,000 acupoints within the system that can be stimulated to enhance the flow of qi. And when special needles are inserted into those acupoints, they help to correct and rebalance the flow of energy and consequently relieve pain and restore health. So that's the theory. That's the idea behind it. Again, the meridian lines are invisible channels through which that qi circulates through the body. There's 12 of them, 6 are yin, 6 of them are yang. And then there's minor branches that form the network of energy channels throughout the body, right? And then there's acupressure, which is different than trigger point therapy. Trigger point therapy is applying pressure to the origin or the insertion of a muscle and a muscle belly and its tendons, so that you can relieve the tension that's going on, the spasm that's going on in a muscle. With acupressure, what's going on is you're applying pressure, but you're doing it at those specific spots, those 1,000, 2,000 spots along the meridian lines in order to open up those meridians and help to continue the proper flow of chi energy through the body, right? And again, that's a mystical concept. Does it meet our radical criteria? No, it doesn't. Not one of the forms of, not the one way that heaven approves, right? But you might say, hang on, I've done it. I've used it. I know people that have done it, right? It works. I used it and it worked. Someone else used it and it worked for them. There's a lot of people that have used it and worked for them. Okay. So is that the basis of whether a treatment modality is the one way that heaven approves, that it works? Okay. So let's challenge that a little bit. This comes Selected Messages, Volume 2, page 53. We need not be deceived. Wonderful scenes with which Satan will be closely connected will soon take place. God's word declares that Satan will work miracles. He will make people sick and then will suddenly remove from them his satanic power. They will then be regarded as healed. These works of apparent healing will bring Seventh-day Adventists and others to the test. Many who have had great light will fail to walk in the light because they have not become one with Christ. Right? So, Satan will work miracles. He'll make people sick. Then he'll remove his power. And it looks like they're healed. And these are apparent healings. Right? So they appear to be healed. Right? So we got to keep that in mind. The success or the outcome of a particular treatment modality is not the basis upon which we can determine whether this is one way that heaven approves or not. Right? Now we have colonics. They're like, oh, don't touch colonics, right? Well, what's the idea here with it? With the idea with colonics is that fecal matter builds up along the walls of the colon, thus preventing proper absorption of nutrients and the elimination of toxins. So you might see pictures of, a cross section of the colon, and you've got all of this fecal matter that's around the edges, and then the small tube where your nutrients are going through. And the idea is that you just can't absorb well because you've got all this caked fecal matter on the walls of the colon, and so you need to clear that out so that you can absorb things well. Right. And so it uses low pressure water to irrigate the colon and eliminate that fecal buildup and restore proper function. That's the idea behind it. Now, colon irrigation or enemas, well, that's been around for a long time. Right. 14th century, the Ebers Papyrus, 14th century Egyptian, BC, Egypt. Describe different methods for preparing enemas. Right? So that's been something around for a long time. And they've been used in nearly every culture. Colonics is like enemas on steroids. Now you have a machine, and the machine is providing the water under pressure. It provides greater pressure than just gravity itself. And that can provide problems too. So can colonic irrigation be something good? Well, sure. I mean, if you have somebody that's constipated and they can't clear out, and you give them an enema and they're still not clearing out and so on, well, it might be beneficial. I've used it a few times at the Lifestyle Center at Uchee Pines. In that case, we did have a colonic machine, rarely used it, but we did have an individual, and she had a colonic, and she really felt like she was full and packed and whatever, and she didn't get much output with the first one. And then she begged, and we did another one another day later. And whoa, she got a lot out. She lost like 5-6 pounds at that time. So from a constipation standpoint, yes, it does work from a physiologic standpoint. But it's not something that needs to be used repetitively. Some people go in and they get colonics treatments like daily for a number of days and so on. It doesn't need to be that way. And this whole idea that the colon gets caked with stool, with fecal material, and the walls of it get caked, doesn't happen. You take any pathologist that has done post-mortem resections and other things like that. You take any gastroenterologist that works in the colon, general surgeon that opens and does, surgery and all that kind of stuff. All of them can testify that fecal material does not stick in and adhere to the intestinal lining. It doesn't, right? The intestines clean themselves through peristalsis. They have this movement and this, squeezing and relaxing, squeezing and relaxing, and so on and so forth. So if an individual is constipated, they don't get constipated on the walls. They get constipated on the center, and then the walls continue to move and expand around that center fecal material, and so on. It's just the opposite way that that the idea behind colonics comes. Now, what about detox programs, right? Everybody's into detox, do this detox program, that detox program, and so on. Well, anatomically, the body cleanses itself, right? It does. It has everything built in. God built everything into it in order to cleanse itself, right? So a detox program really is not necessary. Unless what you're simply doing is supporting the normal proper function of the body, right? So you have the liver, the kidneys, lungs, skin, right? They're very efficient at removing waste products from the system. And so if you really want a detox program, well, support the function of the liver, support the function of the kidneys, support the function of the lungs, support the function of the skin, drink lots of water, get exercise, sweat more, eat a, proper diet. Maybe fast a little bit if you've been overeating, and so on and so forth. Use hot and cold fomentations over the liver. Maybe use some herbs that help with liver function, like dandelion and milk thistle. Maybe some herbs that help with kidney function, like uva ursi and corn silk, and things like that, and so on. So you help support the normal function of the different cleansing organs of the body, and that's going to be your detox program. You don't have to take this detox, take that detox, and so on and so forth, right? Here's a detox program, ionized foot bath. I don't know if any of you have ever used it. The theory is that when you put your feet in the bath, it puts good ions into your body and it removes toxins. And so start out with water like this, and by the time you're done with the treatment, your water looks all dirty like this, and it's supposedly taking toxins and heavy metals out of your body and putting it into solution here, and so it's cleansing you, right? So the toxins are manifested as a dirty, rusty discoloration of the water while the device is running. So you place your feet into the ionizer, and it's got a bit of salt added to it, right? And it has a small electric current that passes between the two electrodes that are here in this device. And soon it becomes quite discolored like this, right? Well, the color doesn't come from the feet, doesn't come from the body. It's not extracting anything from you. It's simply the corrosion of the metal electrodes on the device itself that happens under the influence of the electricity and the ions that are in the water and so on, right? Because those pads, the metal electrodes, are usually made from iron, nickel, or copper, and all of those can decompose into colored ions. And the color is going to vary with the amount of salt that's present in the solution, the pH of the solution, and also if you have certain soaps and other things that have been used on the feet before using the device. That's all going to interact with it and determine how dark and what color and so on. And interestingly enough, if you simply put the salts in and the soaps and other things like that, or you just dip your feet in the water for a little bit and then take them out and then run the machine, same thing's going to happen without any feet in it, right? False method. Now, what about liver flushes or gallbladder flushes, right? So these are proposed to get rid of gallstones. Here you have somebody that has collected their output after doing one of these flushes, and you see a coin and the different size of different matter that they got rid of here. Right, so the usual flush is like a half a cup or more of vegetable oil consumed with citrus juice and some Epsom salt. So you have fat, acid, and salt. Fat, acid, and salt. That's your formula, right? And what you end up with is many green, brown, yellow, or black blobs of various sizes like this that can be eliminated, right? Now, are these real gallstones or are they not? Well, the false gallstones dissolve into an oily smudge over time. True ones, they remain stable. They're in that shape, they're going to be in that shape. The false ones have an irregular globular shape, as you saw in the last picture. The true ones actually are almost crystalline-like, and they're a sharply faceted appearance, almost like there's little pieces of glass that are sticking out of it. The false ones are usually described as soft, waxy, or gelatinous. The real gallstones they're hard, they're difficult to crack. Softer ones are crumbly or kind of dry in their texture, but they're pretty stable, right? False ones, you can cut through them easily with a knife. True ones, well, I mean, try cutting a ball of rocks, right? Or sand. It's not easy to cut. The false ones, they can be bright green. They have some translucency. So if you put a light behind them and shine the light, then you can see the light coming through it. It doesn't happen with real gallstones. And the false ones can be produced in amounts far beyond the capacity of either the gallbladder or the entire biliary system. As long as you continue the flush, you will continue to get more stuff out because it's simply a chemical reaction of the fat, the acid, and the salt together in the digestive system with the digestive enzymes. And you take more of it, you'll get more out. You take more of it, you get more out. And when it's the true one, if you don't have a gallbladder, you're not making gallstones. Hello? No gallbladder, no gallstones. And in this, individuals who had no gallbladder, they'll take this and they'll get plenty of stuff out because it's just a chemical reaction that happens in the system. Is it really doing anything for the gallbladder? Or the liver? No. So do these meet our radical criteria? No, they don't. Colonics, can they be used as kind of an accentuated enema in the case of severe constipation? Sure, they can. And in that context, okay, that's fine. But the basis of their usual use is false. Right? All right, now what about other energy therapies? So we have therapies directed at correcting imbalances of energy flow through the body in the terms of reflexology, Reiki, therapeutic touch, Bowen technique, and Iridology. So we're going to look at these specifically. So the aim at these particular energy therapies is to balance, again, the body's energy and enhance the body's own healing response. But these particular therapies are going to focus on energy fields that exist in and around the body, not necessarily meridians. These are going to look at more like biofields of energy. And they're based on the belief that there's a universal life force like prana, like the Ayurveda, or a subtle energy that resides in and around the body that one is going to be manipulating. And so therapeutic touch uses the therapist's healing energy. So the therapist has the healing energy, and it uses the therapist's own healing energy to identify and repair imbalances in the patient's biofield. So that's therapeutic touch. You have reflexology, where you apply pressure to different areas of the hands, feet, or ears that correspond to internal organs in the body. And you can see kind of a little map here of, well, if you want to fix the eyes, you have to press here. If you want to fix the ears, you have to press here. If you want to fix the brain, you have to push there. If you want to fix the scapula, you push here, and so on and so forth, right? So treatments are supposed to help to prevent ulcers, to treat migraines, viral infections, to improve circulation, reasoning, productivity, cleanse the body of toxins, and so on and so forth. Where did it come from? Well, it's hard to pin down. There is a pictograph in an Egyptian tomb dated 2330 BC that has somebody playing with somebody's foot. Is that related to it? Don't know. There is, we know, 1000 BC, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, and it has a chapter that's dedicated to examining foot method, right? And Marco Polo, he translated that into Italian and brought it to Europe back in the 1300s, right? Well, eventually that was picked up by William Fitzgerald, which is considered the father of reflexology in the United States. He printed his book or published his book, Zone Therapy, back in 1917. And really, there's no physiologic evidence that regions of the foot or the ear or the hands correspond to certain organs or organ systems of the body. There's no evidence for that. And yeah. So does this cause us to rely upon the creator? No. Support proper anatomy and physiology? No. Introduce anything debilitating? Physically, maybe not. Spiritually? Restore independence and self-control? Not really. Consistent with the creator and creation? No. Addresses the cause? No. Conforms to the fundamental law? No. All right. So what about Reiki? Well, here you have practitioners that claim to harness and transmit universal life energy. It's kind of like therapeutic touch by placing their hands in specific positions on or near the body. Right. So you don't necessarily touch. Therapeutic touch, you do here with Reiki, not necessarily. And then you can visualize special symbols that enable you to, you can even send healing energy far away, even through a telephone call and so on and so forth with Reiki. Now, this came from a Japanese Buddhist priest by the name of Mikao Usui. And what he did is he went to a training rediscovery course in a Buddhist monastery, and he was fasting, meditating, and praying for about 21 days, and he had a vision. And in that vision, he had Sanskrit symbols that were brought to his view, and he was able to interpret these Sanskrit symbols, and in that he developed this healing art of Reiki. And it became popular in Japan, and then an American was treated by that and then ended up bringing it back to the States, and it became more popular here. Now, does that fit our radical criteria? The answer is no. All right, move on. Next. Therapeutic touch. Again, practitioners claim to detect and correct energy imbalances by moving their hands above the patient's body. And touching the body. Healing supposedly results from the transfer of excess energy from the healer to the patient. And nothing of this nature has been able to be demonstrated. Right. Where did it come from? Well, it came from Dora Kuntz and Dolores Krieger. Dora Kuntz was a psychic healer. Dolores Krieger was a nurse. Back in 1972, they both studied Oscar Estebani, who was a Hungarian healer. And they watched him as he healed a lot of people by laying hands on them. And Krieger concluded that he was transferring prana, or that vital energy force, G, you might call it, to the patient, which caused then the healing. Now, is this consistent with our radical criteria? The answer is no. Move on. Bowen therapy. All right, so the Bowen technique, you use specific light, very light moves across tendons, muscles, and fascia throughout the body. They use their thumbs and fingers to make moves, applies very light pressure, right? Very light pressure. So this is not massage, really. Although there is a form of massage that is similar, but it's based on anatomy, and it's, what is it? It is lymphatic massage. And so there are certain, in massage, there are certain very light movements that you can make along the lines of the lymphatic vessels, and helping with stimulating lymphatic flow from the tissues. That at least has a basis in physiology. This Bowen therapy doesn't. It comprised of a series of precise and elegant moves that stimulate energy flow. The therapist then leaves the room to allow the body to make use of the information given to it. So this is information given to the body that the body can then use to generate energy flow later. This came about by Thomas Ambrose Bowen, who was from Australia. He started developing the technique in the 1950s, and he was interested in helping people with their suffering, and began to notice that certain moves on the body had particular effects. And so he started, continued working with that without any formal training. He thought that his work was a gift from God. And this guy, Oswald Wrench, he was an osteopath. He came and he studied Bowen and his technique, took a lot of notes, and then held a conference on it first in 1986, started an academy of it in 1987, and by 1990 he was going around the world spreading the ideas of this wonderful therapy. Does it meet our radical criteria? No, it doesn't. Next. Iridology. According to iridologists, the iris of the eye represents a kind of map of the human glands, organs, and systems of the whole body. And so your forehead is represented here, and your upper jaw, nose, and so on and so forth. So there's all these different components of the body that's represented in the iris. And so problems show up in the iris as spots or flecks or white or dark streaks and so on. The texture and color indicate a person's general state of health and so on. Where does this come from? Well, there was Ignaz von Pestley around in the 1800s. He was a Hungarian scientist, physician, and a homeopath. And he noticed that there were similar spots in the eyes of a man and an owl who both had broken legs. And so he thought, I wonder if there's a connection. Maybe there's a connection between these things. And so he kind of thought about that, talked about it for a while, didn't go very far with it. Then this Nils Liljeqvist came along. He was a little bit later, and he was a Swedish priest, a doctor, and a healer. And he took quinine and iodine and noticed that there was maybe a change in his iris color. And so he became fascinated in this, and he made drawings of irises and started diagnosing people based upon this. And then Bernard Jensen, he was a chiropractor from America. He brought it to the United States and made it more popular as well. Now, the truth is that the iris's texture remains unchanged after birth unless there's trauma. And pigment changes happen within the first years of life and then pretty much stay constant. And there have been tests or studies that have been done where iridologists have been given pictures of individuals' irises and then, asked to diagnose what their problems and conditions are. And their diagnoses have not been better than chance, really. So, yeah, no more accurate than random. So is that a radical therapy? It doesn't meet God's criteria, so it's not the one that heaven approves. All right, what about a few other things? All right. Well, I don't know about internationally, but in the United States, this is a big one. In North America, chiropractic medicine literally means done by hand. Kairos means hand, and practice is practice. So it really refers to manipulation of the spine. And that's what chiropractors do, is a lot of manipulation of the spine. Some use spinal manipulation as a cure-all, right? It's going to fix anything and everything. You've got a problem in this organ or this organ system, we'll do it. Others are a little more selective, and they use it for musculoskeletal issues or pain, back pain and other things of that nature. Spinal manipulation may be used in limited circumstances, but the theoretical basis is based upon this idea of a subluxation. And the subluxation, as described in chiropractic medicine, has never been demonstrated. It's never been demonstrated. It's described as a complex of functional and or structural and or pathological articular changes that compromise neural integrity and may influence organ system and general health. Right, so that's a definition of a subluxation. There is the term subluxation used in medicine as well, in allopathic medicine, and that is where you have, how do I demonstrate that? Well, use two pens. All right, so that is a situation where, let's say these two pens represent two vertebrae, and you want the vertebrae to be lined up on top of each other. But if one of them starts moving out from under the other one, or the other one starts moving over on top of the other one and starts moving over, and they're not aligned anymore, or they're misaligned a little bit, that's a subluxation. If you can see it on an x-ray, if you can, and so on, and there's a significant displacement and you can measure it, then that's from a medical standpoint of subluxation. From a chiropractic standpoint, you can't, you give it to a radiologist, they won't be able to see it. So the chiropractic vertebral subluxation complex has been a source of controversy since its inception in 1895 due to its metaphysical origins and claims of far-reaching effects on health and disease. It has never yet been proven to exist. Right? Now, where does this come from? This is interesting. So Daniel David Palmer was the originator of chiropractic. And again, he was mid-1800s to early 1900s. And this is where he says it came from. The knowledge and philosophy given me by Dr. Jim Atkinson, an intelligent spiritual being, together with explanations of phenomena, principles resolved from causes, effects, powers, laws, and utility, appealed to my reason. Right? So he has this spiritual entity, Dr. Jim Atkinson by name, along with these different things, appealed to his reason. The method by which I obtained an explanation of certain physical phenomena from an intelligence in the spiritual world. So this is not coming from God. This is coming from a spirit entity by the name of Dr. Jim Atkinson, is known in biblical language as inspiration. Well, that's why the Bible tells us to test the spirits, right? In a great measure, the chiropractor's adjuster, this was the book, this was the original book for the chiropractic practice, was written under such spiritual promptings. So the chiropractic methodology and philosophy came through Palmer's spiritual interactions with a spiritual being and so on. So he believed the human body had ample supply of natural healing power to transmit, and it was transmitted through the nervous system. And if any one organ was affected by an illness, it must not be receiving its normal nerve supply. And he called that a spinal misalignment or a subluxation. Not something that you could see on x-ray or other things like that, just simply an effect, a physical effect in the body because it's not receiving its normal nerve supply. And so now he's coming up with these things in order to restore that nerve supply. And he saw it as a form of realigning and reestablishing that supply. And these are his words: by correcting these displacements of osseous tissue, the tension frame of the nervous system, I claim that I am rendering obedience, adoration, and honor to the all-wise spiritual intelligence, as well as a service to the segmented individual portions thereof, a duty I owe to both God and mankind. So he obviously saw what he was doing in a spiritual light. Right? In accordance with this aim and end, the Constitution of the United States and the Statutes Personal of California confer upon me and all persons of chiropractic faith the inalienable right to practice our religion without restraint or interference. So there you go. There's the origin of it. So does this rely upon the creator? No. Does it support proper anatomy and physiology? No. Does it introduce anything debilitating? Maybe some of those readjustments have resulted in permanent damage for individuals. Does it restore independence and self-control? Nah, you can do what you want to and then go to a chiropractor and get adjusted. Is it consistent with the creator and creation? Does it address the cause? Does it conform to the fundamental law? Is it the one way that heaven approves? Now, what about kinesiology or applied kinesiology? Well, this works on the theory that foods and chemicals to which an individual is sensitive causes muscle weakening as a result of changing the body's electrical field. Practitioners place the suspected substance in the hand or under the tongue and then check for muscle weakening. So here you have an individual holding their hand out. Here's the person that's testing them. Here they are holding a plastic cup with the substance inside the plastic cup. And even though they might not even be touching the substance, but it's in the cup and they're touching it, and this individual is pushing their arm down, telling them to resist. And if it feels like it's weaker in the resistance, then, then there's some problem. Maybe there's a sensitivity to that substance or so on. That's the idea. Came about by a chiropractor who was studying acupuncture, massage, acupressure, yoga, and polarity therapy. And George Goodhart, he came about with this idea of kinesiology. And again, the basic theory revolves around chi, life force, used as a diagnostic tool to locate imbalances in the energy fields. Does that meet our radical criteria? No, it doesn't. Moving on. Homeopathy. It operates upon two basic principles. One, like cures like. So a disease can be cured by a substance that produces similar symptoms as the disease in healthy people. And the law of minimum dose. That is, the lower the dose of the medication, the greater its effectiveness. All right. So you just think about that and think about it logically. Where has that ever worked before in any other thing? Where the lower the dose is, the greater the effectiveness. Sorry. So this came from Christian Friedrich Samuel Hahnemann back in the 1800s. He was a German physician and a writer. He was not happy with the heroic medicine of that day that was bloodletting and poisoning and other things of that nature. It was right for him not to like that stuff. And he read that a certain toxic plant treated malaria. And when he ate that plant, go figure, you find out that it's toxic, but you eat it anyway. So it created the symptoms similar to malaria. And so he thought, well, maybe substances that create certain symptoms in a healthy person can treat someone that has a disease causing those similar symptoms. So that's his thought process, right? So he began to dilute substances to reduce their toxic effect so people weren't really killed by what he was giving them. And he had this belief that of potentization, where you dilute it more and more and you shake it, and it still has power to treat the symptoms or disease in question. It's now believed in homeopathy that the remedy is supposed to become more potent with each dilution. For maximum potency, dilution continues even after it's mathematically impossible that a single atom of the original substance remains, and the remedy continues to get more potent, right? So the substance is no longer present, but it affects the person through the vibrations or the energy that is left behind. And there's an idea of water memory, that the water remembers the substances that went in it, and even though there's no substance anymore, the water remembers it, and then you get the treatment effect of it based upon that. Well, we are told, and when the great question of health reform was opened before me, the methods of treating the sick were plainly revealed to me. The old school cruel practice, and its sure results, that was bloodletting and poisoning and whatever, where one claimed to be benefited, thousands were made lifelong invalids who, had they never seen a physician, would have recovered of themselves without implanting in their system disease of the most distressing character. Back in those days, it was bad to go see a doctor because they would poison you. Eclectic was less dangerous. That was another type of medical practice. They had medical schools. They had eclectic medical schools around the United States, and they essentially took from allopathic, they took from homeopathic, they took from chiropractic, they took from osteopathic, and so on. And they were eclectic. They took from all these different ones and took kind of the best parts of each of them and put them together. The homeopathy, which creates so deadly opposition from the regular practice, all right, so regular doctors hated homeopaths, was attended with far less evil consequences than the old school practice. Well, at least homeopathy wasn't as dangerous as regular medicine, but did much harm because it could be resorted to so easily and used so readily with so little expense. Many practice upon themselves and fall back upon this without real knowledge of their ailments and do great harm to themselves. Proper regulation of their diets, abstinence from tea, coffee, and allspices and flesh meats, gaining an intelligent knowledge of temperance would be medicine above all drugs. All right, so the problem with it is it can be so easily used. You run to that rather than changing your diet and fixing your lifestyle and other things of that nature. Now, there was a controversy that rose in California. Dr. Maxon, he was a doctor at one of the lifestyle centers, drew off or left the health retreat and in a way that God did not approve. The only reason that he gave was that his methods of treatment, he was an allopath, were like regular medicine, were not in harmony with those of Dr. Gibbs. Dr. Gibbs happened to be an eclectic. He said, I want to tell you, Sister White, this eclectic and homeopathic practice is of the same piece as mesmerism and spiritualism. It originated with the devil. Who? And then she goes on to say, who gave him that information? Certainly not the Lord, for the statement has no foundation in the truth. Right? So it's not true that it's the same as mesmerism and spiritualism. But in their practice, the physicians should seek more and more to lessen the use of drugs instead of increasing it. When Dr. A, whoever they were, came to the health retreat, she laid aside her knowledge and practice of hygiene, like how to eat, how to drink, how to, and she administered the little homeopathic doses for almost every ailment. So what you had, she had a homeopathic treatment for it. This was against the light God had given. Thus, our people who had been taught to avoid drugs in almost every form were receiving a different education. Go to the drugs. I was obliged to tell her that this practice of depending upon medicine, whether in large or small doses, was not in accordance with the principles of health reform. Keep that in mind. So, does homeopathic medicine meet our radical criteria? No. What about hypnotism? Right, it's used to induce an altered state of consciousness in the subject where suggestions can be made directly to that person's unconscious mind. Right, it's used by practitioners to help with behavior control, symptoms, health and mental health, and so on and so forth. It came about with Franz Friedrich Anton Mesmer back in the 1700s to 1800s. He was a German physician, studied in the universities of Dillingen and Ingolstadt, Jesuit universities. He believed that there was a natural energy transference, a fluid that occurred between all animate and inanimate objects. He called it animal magnetism, is what he called it, later referred to as mesmerism. And it's kind of the same idea as qi. And he thought that disease was produced by an imbalance of that fluid, of that animal magnetism within the human body, and it could be cured through the use of magnets and electrical currents. But he eventually gave up the magnets and the electrical currents and proposed that the healer's body, his own body, permeated with that animal magnetism, could redirect the patient's magnetic fluid without the use of magnets. So the goal was to introduce a crisis in the individual by altering their mental state through a fever, delirium, convulsions, uncontrolled weeping, nervous twitches, and so on. And he thought this was good, right? And suggestibility and dominance were used to produce a trance and thus realign the body. Now we're told men and women are not to study the science of how to take captive the minds of those who are associated with them. This is the science that Satan teaches. We are to resist everything of the kind. We are not to tamper with mesmerism and hypnotism, the science of the one who lost his first estate and who was cast out of the heavenly courts. So this comes directly from Satan. I was directed to this scripture as especially applying to modern spiritualism, Colossians 2:8. Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy or vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. Thousands, I was shown, have been spoiled through the philosophy of phrenology and animal magnetism and have been driven into infidelity. If the mind commences to run in this channel, it is almost sure to lose its balance and control and be controlled by a demon. Vain deceit fills the minds of poor mortal humans. They think that there is such power in themselves to accomplish great works that they realize no necessity of a higher power. Their principles and faith are after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. It's a problem. So does that meet a radical criterion? No, get rid of it. What about evangelical healings, right? The practice of prayer and gestures, laying on of hands, believed by some to elicit divine intervention in spiritual and physical healing. You have individuals like Benny Hinn and others that were very prominent in this arena of faith healing. Well, what about that? Well, men under the influence of evil spirits will work miracles. They will make people sick by casting their spell upon them and will then remove the spell, leading others to say that those who were healed have been miraculously healed. This Satan has done again and again. Now, I'm not saying every spiritual healer is from that standpoint. I'm just saying that, I mean, there's a lot of people that are sincere, right? That are sincere. And did the disciples do this? Well, yes, they did. But let's keep reading. The way in which Christ worked was to preach the word and to relieve suffering by miraculous works of healing. But I am instructed that we cannot now work in this way, for Satan will exercise his power by working miracles. All right, so there's the problem. We're in a day and age where Satan is allowed to work his miracles, and so things would get confusing. God's servants today could not work by means of miracles because spurious works of healing claiming to be divine will be wrought. So what do we do? For this reason, the Lord has marked out a way in which his people are to carry forward a work of physical healing combined with the teaching of the word. Sanitariums are to be established, or lifestyle centers. And with these institutions are to be connected workers who will carry forward genuine medical missionary work. Thus, a guarding influence is thrown around those who come to the sanitarium for treatment. This is the provision the Lord has made whereby gospel medical missionary work it is to be done for many souls. These institutions are to be established out of the cities, and in them educational work is to be intelligently carried forward. So there you go. That's our plan for nowadays. You know that Satan will come in to deceive, if possible, the very elect. He claims to be Christ, and he is coming in pretending to be the great medical missionary. He will cause fire to come down from heaven in the sight of men to prove that he is God. We must stand barricaded by the truths of the Bible. The canopy of truth is the only canopy under which we can safely stand. Some have asked me, why should we have sanitariums? Why should we not, like Christ, pray for the sick that they may be healed miraculously? I have answered, suppose we were able to do this in all cases. How many would appreciate the healing? Would those who were healed become health reformers or continue to be health destroyers? Jesus Christ is the great healer, but he desires that by living in conformity with his laws, we may cooperate with him in the recovery and the maintenance of health. Combined with the work of healing, there must be an imparting of the knowledge of how to resist temptations. Those who come to our sanitarium should be aroused to a sense of their own responsibility to work in harmony with the God of truth. We cannot heal, we cannot change the disease conditions of the body, but it is our part as medical missionaries, as workers together with God, to use the means that he has provided. Then we should pray that God will bless these agencies. We do believe in a God. We believe in a God who hears and answers prayer. He has said, ask and ye shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. Good principles for us. So does it rely upon the Creator? Maybe. Does it support proper anatomy and physiology? Maybe. Does it introduce anything debilitating? No, not necessarily. Does it restore independence and self-control? Well, if I can just go and get restored like that, but then I can continue eating my Twinkies, my hot dogs, and my other things of that nature, well, then no, and that's going to be a problem, right? Is it consistent with the Creator and creation? Maybe. Does it address the cause? Not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. Does it conform to the fundamental law, the law of life? Not necessarily. It can, but not necessarily. All right, now our last topic that we're going to cover is allopathic medicine. So allopathic, it was actually coined by Christian Friedrich Samuel Hahnemann, who was the founder of homeopathy, and he used it as a derogatory term to describe the practice of mainstream European physicians. And they were practicing what we would call now heroic medicine. And the idea was that symptoms were treated with substances that produce the opposite effect as the symptom. So if if you're having diarrhea, then you would use something that causes constipation. If you had constipation, you would use something that causes diarrhea. If you have a lot of mucus production, you would take something that dries you out. If you're dried out, you would use something that, that idea. So heroic medicine was based on the balance of 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. So almost like traditional Chinese medicine with the idea of the 5 elements and so on. And disease was caused by an excess of one humor and would be treated by the opposite or by removing that humor, right? That was the idea back then in the 1700s and so on. And they advocated rigorous treatments, bloodletting, purging, sweating to shock the body back to health after illness caused by a humoral imbalance. That's how we lost our first president of the United States, by our physicians treating him with their heroic medicine, George Washington. And as time progressed, they began to rely more and more upon poisonous drugs like mercury, arsenic, strychnine, quinine, and so on to treat disease. They moved away from bloodletting and the other harsher forms of treatment. And they kind of got away from the idea of humors, and started treating with these things. And as knowledge of physiology and pharmacology improved, they got more and more sophisticated, and more specific medications were developed that replaced the more obviously poisonous drugs and so on. And today, allopathic medicine is described as a system in which medical doctors and other healthcare professionals, such as nurses, pharmacists, therapists, treat symptoms and diseases using drugs, radiation, or surgery. Drugs, radiation, or surgery, right? Allopathic medicine has gone a long ways in a few hundred years, and this is what we recognize of allopathic medicine, right? A lot of good that has, been done and intended to be done, but there's some other stuff too. There's medication-associated deaths. In 1994, there were 2.2 million hospitalizations for serious adverse drug reactions. So an individual that took a medication the way that they were supposed to and had some kind of adverse reaction, like this poor young lady here. 106 of those patients died in a year and as a result of drug reactions, and that was about twice the amount of U.S. soldiers that died in the Vietnam War, just in 1 year. That was a report in 1998. Now, adverse drug reactions would then be accounted somewhere between the fourth and sixth leading cause of death in the United States, according to those numbers. Now, there was a 1999 report that came out in Institute of Medicine that showed that at least 44,000 annual hospital deaths were due to medical errors. And they thought, well, maybe that's up to actually 98,000 deaths per year just from medical errors. We're not talking about adverse drug reactions, medical errors, right? And then in 2009 came a report saying that we have almost 100,000 individuals that die every year from infections that are acquired in the hospital-acquired infections. Oh boy. And then in 2016 came out this study, medical error, the third leading cause of death in the United States. And they showed that about 250,000 deaths every year are related to medical error in the United States alone. That would cause it to be the third leading cause of death. So our healthcare system trying to fix us is the third leading cause of death, killing us. And then if you add medical error and then you add on top of it hospital-acquired infections, and then you add on top of that, not the error, but the actual, adverse effects associated with proper use of medications and other things like that, then, well, maybe we're pushing close to 500,000. And we might actually push ourselves up to maybe between one and maybe number two, right? Now, if you had an airline and that airline lost one airplane a year or two or three or four, would you be comfortable flying on that airline? What if it lost 503 jumbo jets of people every year? Well, that's what our healthcare system is doing in the United States alone, right? My spirit is stirred within me when I see the efforts made, even among our people, by professional men to cry down and demerit every medical practice in the treatment of disease, except the one method of allopathy, which they have learned, right? So she's saying, we've got doctors that are allopathic doctors, and they're saying everything else is heebie-jeebie, right? Everything else is bad. I will not fall into line with this thing, but I will say, in the name of the Lord, let the drugs fall into disuse and practice upon hygienic principles, how to eat, how to breathe, how to live, how to be natural, and so on. It is not in God's order to educate the people to depend upon drug medication. And what have we done and where are we at? Is that not what we get when we go to the doctor? Physicians who believe present truth need to make advanced moves in reform. The voice that I heard speak to the physicians was educate, educate. Suffering humanity, line upon line, precept upon precept, to reform their health-destroying habits, and if sick, to depend on simple remedies that nature provides. There's our admonition. The system, allopathy, in which Dr. Maxim has been educated, he regards as the best of all methods. The Lord regards all this talk just as he regards the talk of the Pharisees, as the invention and tradition of men. All right, so if you think allopathy is the best of all of the things, God says that you're just like Pharisees. All those who receive their education from the regular or allopathic school are molded by the spirit of the educators, and they generally act out their impressions that they have received from their instructors and denounce every other system as satanic. Is this the way of the Lord? If the priests and Pharisees kept the way of the Lord, then Dr. Maxim's ideas are correct. All right, so are all drugs equal? So this is a letter from medical students sent to Ellen White with that question. From our study of the testimonies in the little work or the little book called How to Live, we can see that the Lord is strongly opposed to the use of drugs in our medical work. Several of the students are in doubt as to the meaning of the word drug as mentioned in How to Live. Does it refer only to the stronger medicines as mercury, strychnine, arsenic, and such poisons, the things we medical students call drugs, or does it also include the simpler remedies as potassium, iodine, squills, etc.? And that's a flower, I believe. We know that our success will be proportionate to our adherence to God's methods. For this reason, I have asked the above question. So here's the response. Your questions, I will say, are answered largely, if not definitively, in How to Live. So if you want to know, look up the little book, How to Live. Drug poisons mean the articles which you have mentioned. The simpler remedies are less harmful in proportion to their simplicity, but in very many cases, these are used when not at all necessary. There are simple herbs and roots that every family may use for themselves and need not call a physician any sooner than they would call a lawyer. I do not think I can give you any definite line of medicines compounded and dealt out by doctors that are perfectly harmless. And yet, it would not be wisdom to engage in controversy over the subject. The practitioners are very much in earnest in using their dangerous concoctions, and I am decidedly opposed to resorting to such things. They never cure. They may change the difficulty to create a worse one. Many of those who practice the prescribing of drugs would not take the same or give them to their children. If they have an intelligent knowledge of the human body, if they understand the delicate, wonderful human machinery, they must know that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that not a particle of these strong drugs should be introduced into this human living organism. As the matter was laid open before me, and the sad burden of the result of drug medication, the light was given me that Seventh-day Adventists should establish health institutions, discarding all these health-destroying inventions, and physicians should treat the sick upon hygienic principles: how you eat, how you drink, how you breathe, how you live, so on. The great burden should be to have well-trained nurses and well-trained medical practitioners to educate, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, there a little. Train the people to correct habits and healthful practices, remembering that an ounce of prevention is more value than a pound of cure. Lectures and studies in this line will prove the highest value. Right? So what about those simpler medications? The homeopathy, which creates so deadly opposition from the regular practice. Remember, it gets diluted down to almost nothing. Was attended with far less evil consequences than the old school practice. All right, so homeopathic treatments are far less deadly and damaging than regular allopathic because it's almost nothing, but did so much harm because it could be resorted to so easily and used so readily with so little expense. maybe we do the same thing with our supplements. Maybe we do the same thing with our herbal stuffs and whatever, right? It's like the homeopathy to us. Many practice upon themselves and fall back upon this without real knowledge of their ailments and do great harm to themselves. Proper regulation of their diet, abstinence from tea, coffee, and all spices and flesh meats, gaining an intelligent knowledge of temperance would be medicine above all drugs. There's more important things. In their practice, let the physician should seek more and more to lessen the use of drugs instead of increasing it. When Dr. A came to the health retreat, she laid aside her knowledge and practice of hygiene and administered the little homeopathic doses for almost every ailment. This was against the light God has given. Thus, our people who had been taught to avoid drugs in almost every form were receiving a different education. Right? So we see, even if it's simpler, it can be resorted to easily and then become a problem. People need to be taught that drugs do not cure disease. It is true that they sometimes afford present relief and the patient appears to recover as a result of their use. This is because nature had sufficient vital force to expel the poison, the drug, and to correct the conditions that cause the disease. Health is recovered in spite of the drug. But in most cases, the drug only changes the form and location of the disease. Oh, you had pneumonia, and now you take a drug. And now you have a rash. Just change the form and location of the disease. Or you had a condition, you took a medication, now you have diarrhea and you have digestive issues or something. Often the effect of the poison seems to be overcome for a time, but the results remain in the system and work great harm at some later period. When he met Sister White, all right, so here's a situation where, all right, somebody avoided using a strong medication in the case of a life-saving situation. When he met Sister White, he asked her this question: would I have sinned to give my boy quinine, because she had said that quinine was not good, when I knew of no other way to check malaria, and when the prospect was that he would die without it? Now, this is an apocryphal statement. This is not something that she actually wrote, something that her son recalled later. And his recollection was that she said, no, we're expected to do the best that we can. Can you take that on its face value? I don't know. But we can say, do the best you can with what you've got. I'm very grateful that there are emergency departments. I'm grateful that there's surgical suites. I'm grateful that there's intensive care units. And there are some things like diagnostics and other things like that that the allopathic system does very well. But there's a lot of things that it does not do very well. Does it meet our radical? Does it rely upon the creator? No. Does it support proper anatomy and physiology? Typically, but with unintended side effects. Does it introduce anything debilitating? Most of the time, yes. Does it restore independence and self-control? No. You keep eating the way that you're eating, live the way that you live. We'll give you medication for the diseases. Is it consistent with the creator and his creation? No. Does it address the cause? No. Does it conform to the fundamental law, the law of life, the law of God? No. So is this one way that heaven approves? No. There are many ways of practicing the healing art. There is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties: pure air, water, cleanliness, proper diet, purity of life, firm trust in God, are remedies for the one of which thousands are dying, yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that the people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all with but little expense, but drugs are expensive both in their outlay of means and in the effect produced upon the system. The work of the Christian physician does not end with the healing the maladies of the body. His efforts should extend to the diseases of the mind, to the saving of the soul. Here's where our foundation comes to. Right? So these are various different false concepts in health and healing. We've covered a lot to cover, over 200 and some slides. I apologize for being so long. Let's pray, and then we'll get to some questions. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings. Thank you for truth. And thank you for evaluating criteria, which we can use to look at different things and understand the truth of it. And we just ask for your blessing to be upon us, for your wisdom to be with us, for you to help us to discern those ways that are your ways and to discard those ways that are not, and to experience the health and healing from you as you desire to give it to us in your will, in your way. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.